I've never been happier to be a PC gamer. I'll be honest, it wasn't really by choice at first. My parents refused to buy game systems for me, so I had to use the family PC for any games I wanted growing up. By the time I was an adult with my own money, I needed a PC anyways for schoolwork and anything else I wanted to do, and the used consoles I bought I barely touched because I wasn't comfortable gaming on a controller. So, pray tell, what does Sony think they're accomplishing here? If you're living under a rock or don't pay much attention to the consoles market, just like me frankly, the PS5 Pro was announced at PlayStation's PS5 technical presentation on September 10th. Sony claims it'll have a bigger GPU, better ray tracing, and PSSR, which is Sony's brand of AI neural upscaling, which means to improve frame rates at higher fidelities. That's fine, a lot of companies do this, and if it actually improves the performance, go nuts. Well, that explains why it's $700 and doesn't have a disk drive, I guess. Please understand that my perspective doesn't come from a PC master race perspective. It comes from being an adult with a budget who's sat through enough Business 101 classes in college to figure out that Sony majorly misfired here, and honestly, so much of the console industry has as well, including the games as a service model that seems to rule every type of gaming hardware, including PCs. So let's talk about it. I'm going to pick on 2 articles today, and before I go any further, this is your reminder not to harass the journalists who wrote these. Yes, the work is sloppy and opinionated, but the goal here is to talk about the points being made, not the people making them. I don't know these guys in person, so I can only talk about those points. The first article comes from IGN, talking about Sony's decision-making around the PS5 Pro's pretty high price point, which Sony cites as lack of competition. I found this concept really kind of wild because while it's true that not as many home consoles are being brought to market these days, as handheld consoles like the Nintendo Switch, Steam Deck, and ROG Ally are gaining traction, it doesn't mean that there's not any competition at all. While, as I said in my introduction, that I've always been a PC gamer, I understand the allure of home consoles. Couch gaming, split screen with friends, exclusive releases, a more tactile controller. It's what the cool kids had. Every gamer in my generation who was a real gamer could be found doing 360 no-scopes on the Xbox 360 in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. The first one. Sort your naming conventions out, for Christ's sake. But let's face it, post-pandemic, we're probably not couch gaming or split-screening much anymore. Doesn't mean that there's no multiplayer, but it's in a different capacity than it used to be, and in the PS5's case, there has been no exclusive games for it at all. So what are you left with that differentiates the PS5 from other methods of play? Well, not much really. Hi, Editing Shannon here. I just wanted to add in a quick clarification. There are a couple of PS5 exclusive games. Spider-Man 2 is probably the biggest one, and also Astrobot, which just came out. The other one is called Quantum Error, which is not very well received, and there was also a free Silent Hill game. The rest seem to be to launch. They were either with the launch of the VR2 headset, or they are made for the VR2 headset, but just regular old PlayStation 5 exclusive releases, there's not been that many. And to be fair to Sony here, it's not like the Xbox One really made that big of a dent in the console market either. And I'll be honest, I didn't even hear a peep about the Xbox X and S series releases. Editing Shannon here. I just wanted to throw in this quick interview from Phil Spencer from 2020, basically talking about how the Xbox strategy has moved away from worrying about console unit sales and moving more towards player counts, which seems to be where the rest of the market is headed, at least according to Phil. This seems to coincide with the less than stellar marketing push for Xbox X and S series. And I looked also on Microsoft's 2023 10K form that they post to their investor relations, and it looks like Xbox is down about 3%, but I don't know what that 3% is made out of. They don't specify in the 10K anywhere that I can find, so just wanted to throw that in there. Now, I need to back up a second because when we talk about exclusive games, it appears the definition may have shifted from what it used to mean. When I refer to console exclusive games, I mean literally only available to play on the console. But after doing some digging, apparently this has now begun to mean only on this brand of console, but also PC, which I tend to find to be a tad bit problematic. Now, don't get me wrong, I know why companies are doing this. Expanding their markets to different hardware was an inevitable reality in order to pay the salaries of Bobby Kotick and all the other god-awful CEOs doing their collective thing. But beyond that, it sells more subscriptions, because now instead of Game Pass only being useful to Xbox users, it can now also be useful to PC users. Same thing goes for Sony's PlayStation Plus subscriptions, but there we run into a problem I'll be expanding on a bit later on. What then differentiates the consoles from PCs as gaming machines? Sure, maybe more powerful hardware, but only for a little while if you can afford a good PC setup. And if you're dropping $700 on a console, plus controllers and subscriptions, you can afford a good PC setup, but more on this later. Ultimately, Sony has two major points of competition: handheld devices and themselves. Gamers often like the flexibility of being able to game wherever they go, and if they own a PC, they're not just going to buy a PS5 just to play Helldivers 2 if they can get it on Steam instead, since crossplay is a feature. More Steam sales will equal less PlayStation sales and less demand for a PlayStation console. I'm guessing Sony may have sales numbers that are giving them this confidence that I obviously don't have access to, but there's also one other problem. It's cheaper to play Helldivers 2 on PC than it is a PlayStation, because there's no PS Plus subscription needed to play online multiplayer if you're playing on Steam. But let's get into the next article and I'll expand on this a little bit more. So the next article comes to us from PC Gamer, and oh boy is it one. The title is, "Yeah, at $700 the PS5 Pro is expensive for a console, but I spent more than double that on my GPU alone." Now, already I was raising an eyebrow at this title because at one time I too had spent a lot of money on a new GPU, but not $1,400. I unfortunately can no longer find the receipt for it, but I had actually imported a 3060 from New Zealand to the US. I'd bought it off Mighty Ape at the time when they were still pretty new, and also at the time that crypto mining was causing newer GPUs to be really hard to find, so scalpers were way overcharging for them. But I definitely did not spend that much on it, even with the disadvantage of scalpers and shipping costs. Probably $400 at most, maybe $500. Editing Shannon here, I finally had to go and just look back through my bank transactions, and I bought it for $767.28, and this would have been around April of 2021. The tagline is, "Just get a gaming PC instead isn't good advice for everyone," which that's fair enough to an extent, but given the information in the title, I have a hard time giving this tagline the benefit of the doubt. This person starts out by talking about how he'll need to scrounge to get that $700 saved up, a little laughable considering the title, but then the second paragraph states that get a gaming PC instead is actually good advice because you get more bang for your buck, which is correct. PCs are used for a variety of tasks outside gaming, as I've outlined, and if you're using any kind of photo or video editing software, you're gonna need a good PC. He then talks about the initial outlay being higher, which, I'll be honest, is an it depends sort of thing to begin with. There's plenty of decent budget PC pre-builds out there, but he finally addresses the title. He bought a 4090, which, let's be reasonable here, is not a fair comparison at all, as he admits in the same sentence. He also justifies this attitude by saying, well, you probably already have a TV and a chair. I mean, I'm gonna be quite honest, as an adult who wasn't poor but definitely not rich, the only TV I've ever owned was free because I think my dad had some kind of rewards program at work and he bought it with those points. I wouldn't own one by choice, and the one that's been sitting in the lounge at my home has never been turned on in the over year and a half that I've been here. We watch everything on YouTube or other streaming sites on monitors large enough to substitute a TV. And to justify those 4K and 8K fidelity promises that the PS5 Pro is justifying its cost on, how expensive a TV would you need to take advantage of that? Monitors for PCs run into this issue too, but how many PC games are making those kinds of fidelity to start? This guy also asserts that you have to have a gamepad on top of all those other necessary peripherals. Never used one in my life and got on fine. How much space do those even take up? By the way, you missed a headset and a microphone for any multiplayer, but you'd also need that for a console too, so we'll give that a mulligan. He also asserts that desks are space hogs, which, again, it depends. I lived in pretty small spaces all my life, a small studio apartment for a good 2 years before moving into this house, and it was never an issue. My current desk is only about 1 meter long, and same with my partner's. We sit back to back in a corner of the lounge with no issues with space elsewhere in the house. He then moans about having to build a PC if you want a really good one, which, no, not necessarily. PC DIY custom builds for games have really only been a recent trend in the last decade or so, with most people defaulting to pre-built models. But we also didn't have the whole specialized game PC build market when home computers first came in vogue either. If you don't want to build a PC, all good. I did my own, but it's not an experience I recommend to everyone, and even replacing parts gets annoying if it's a motherboard or something more complicated. And it is more expensive than just picking up a pre-built. Then we get to the crux of the article. You're not thinking about what it means to start from scratch, which on the flip side, as I illustrated with the TV example, I don't think he is either. In fact, estimates for most gaming statistics place 900 million PC players and 630 million on console. Obviously there's some overlap here, but clearly more people have chosen to play on PC regardless of the supposed initial outlay. And why may that be? Hilariously, after admitting his PS5 is gathering dust because he's using his PC more, he then asserts that if you don't have a basic PS5, so obviously this is going to apply to the PS5 Pro as well, you have a lot of games, especially if you have a PS Plus account. So now we don't just have a console and probably a TV to match the higher fidelity, but we also have to have a PS Plus account if we want to play anything that's online multiplayer and not free to play. So that's not including the game you have to buy as well, which the very basic one is $126 a year. This does not include any of the back catalogs, so if you do already own those, you either have to buy a version of the PS5 Pro with a disk drive or buy a separate disk drive, so that's extra cost, or you have to either buy the games or a higher cost PS Plus subscription tier. Whereas with a PC, you may also have to buy the disk drive if you want to play your older physical games, but you can also just buy from a much larger catalog of games and run a much larger catalog of games, including the PlayStation titles, because remember, the PS5 titles all have a PC version as well, and you don't have to pay to play multiplayer. So all that to say, you're gonna be spending the money at some point in either case. And in Fraser's case here, he's only using his PC anyway, so if he buys a PS5 Pro and gets bored with it in a week, is it also just gonna sit gathering dust? What's the point? But GTA 6, he says, who cares if PC gamers have to wait a little while? We're usually waiting for stuff to go on sale anyway. Because Steam has great discounts, and as much as I bag on Epic, they have free games that they give away all the time to keep. I'm going to be honest, the premise of this article seems to assume that any of us who are into gaming don't already have some kind of hardware to play games on, which is frankly stupid. If you're buying a console of any kind for the first time these days, it's probably because you've got a kid who you can't trust with a PC of their own yet. This argument maybe would have worked when consoles were a brand new way to play games, but this part of the market is old now. People have been around the block enough with it to figure out where their preferences are, or if they're able to afford to have all the options, or they're a game dev that's developing for multiple platforms. This guy concludes his article the same way he started it, with a dumb comparison that makes no sense and isn't fair, comparing his last smartphone purchase to the PS5 Pro's cost. But it's two different things, and let's be fair, smartphones these days are like mini PCs, and if you're smart and don't need to upgrade every year, it'll last a long time. My Samsung Galaxy 10 Plus is still kicking, and it's my best friend when I'm stuck at the train station. I'll be honest, I don't think console war enthusiasts realize that they're all being played here. Doing research for this video has been kind of depressing. The games as a service model sucks, and it sucks the life out of everything. Feeling that I don't have control of the games I purchase sucks as well, and Steam's no exception to this, let's be fair, but I couldn't imagine having to outlay an extra $120 a year on top of all my other bills just to play online video games. It's honestly insulting. And like the statistics I share show, there's tons of overlaps in the market about what kind of devices people use. If you have a choice, why not have that initial outlay last you a long time and not get stuck with a bunch of extra charges for basic functionality? I do worry that if home consoles continue to go down this path, along with the fact that there seems to be no true console-exclusive titles for them, their utility will decrease so much that they'll cannibalize themselves. I'm not moved by this sad attempt to stick up for the little guy who can barely afford anything but a PS5 Pro. Chances are he's already made do with a used PC rig, a PS4, or wait until a used one goes on sale and snag it from eBay at half the cost. If you're truly poor, you are not waiting for your pre-order to load up. You're waiting for the next big sale if you've got time to game at all. Anyway, sorry, I've ranted a bit, but the point is this. If you want to buy the PS5 Pro, go ahead if you feel it's for you. But I feel it is important to keep in mind that we should continue to ask questions of companies like this when they start gatekeeping or paywalling features that existed before for no extra cost, but raise the base cost of the item anyway. I personally will continue to play on my PC that also allows me to make videos to rant about these topics, since the PS5 doesn't seem to have that capability yet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye! Ugh. Fuck.